Hello and welcome back to the 2020 Wolfpack Warrior Workshop. We have kind of just a relaxed panel for you right now. We're just going to be pretty open, question and answer session. Some unanswered stuff that you've all sent in over the last 48 hours or so. So we'll try to get to some of that. We've got one leftover question from the panel before that Ken is going to take. And we've got Doug Hughes back. So he's going to take a couple of the questions that we couldn't get to earlier. Yeah, that's about it. So it should be pretty fun.
It's taking us offline now. Right?
What's that?
It's taking us offline now.
Yeah.
We're all getting in this plane.
Yeah, I don't think so. Looks like we might be going for a drive in a car though. So
I get about halfway home and
go ahead, Doug.
No, I get about halfway home and I decided I'd go ahead and find a shady spot. So yeah, I'm in the car.
Perfect. Appreciate it, Doug. I just want to remind people that if you want to come inside the virtual event and participate, it's wolf-back.com/workshop. There's going to be some really fun interactive live poll panels coming up later today. We've got a silent auction still going that is going to close at 5 p.m. Eastern today. So just 4 more hours for that. Lots of really cool stuff you can get for bargain price there. And we've got a fundraiser going. And one of the questions, actually, I'll just take that one since I saw it there from Amy Ripple Elton, was how are we doing on the fundraising goal? So far, we're over 10,000. So that's actually a really big deal for us. And, we're going to try to get to 50,000. I don't think we'll make it by the end of this workshop, but hey, you never know. But definitely by the end of this month, we're going to keep pushing that goal because we really do need that to do the things that we've outlined there. Keeping some really good people around. So if you can contribute a little bit, definitely do it. If you're inside the event, it's the take action button in the bottom left. You can always just go to wolf-pack.com/28. Josh made a nice redirect there for the 20th Amendment. And that's it. That's all I'll say for now. Let's get right into it. So Ken, there was one question left over from the last panel. It seems this is from Dennis Sickle. Hope I said that right. It seems like the idea that corporations are people is flimsy. Corporations can't vote. People own corporations, etc. So is it just flat out corruption rather than a sincere argument? What would be the best argument that corporations are not people, in your opinion?
That's a great question. I think it is corruption, to be honest, but there are some ways to argue against it. One is mockery. I did a TED Talk, which you can find online. Just Google my name and TED Talk, and I did a thing called of metaphors and magic wands, where I start. My opening scene is 4 years from now, a case comes down: Corporations United versus the FEC, which gives corporations the right to vote. And then I spin out a crazy scenario about all the crazy votes that happen because everybody creates new corporations and gives them 10,000 votes because their corporation can now vote. So you can mock it, but a more effective way to attack it, I think, is to ask the question: if corporations are people, who are the people? One of the ideas of corporations, what is a corporation? It's a legal fiction. It's a non-entity. It's not a real thing. It's all made up in the law. But people try and theorize what corporations are. And one of the theories is corporations are an accumulation of people. You hear that a lot. The corporation is made up of people and therefore should have the rights of people. Then ask the question, okay, if a corporation is made up of people, what people get to say what it does? So does the corporation represent all of its customers? Probably not. How about its employees? The employees are people in the corporation, but are their interests the same as the corporation's? No, their interests really are an expense that the corporation would rather do without. If they can automate, get rid of your job to do that. So the corporation can't be the people, the employees. Is the corporation the shareholders? Well, do the shareholders, when they buy stock, do so because I like your politics, or do they like your product? So is the corporation the shareholders? Is the corporation the C-suite, the CEO, CFO, the people at the top? Is it the board of directors? Who are the people that are the corporation? There's so many different options, and they're all at odds with each other. The shareholders might not agree with the board of directors. There's all kinds of different disparate views in the corporation. How can it speak with one voice? And there's so many different constituent parts to it. So the idea that a corporation is a person at the practical level makes no sense, because there's no way to really determine what that person thinks or what their political views really are. You're really just privileging the C-suite as it works out. And they're people. They already have their own voices. Why do they need to amplify their voices through the corporation? So that's my answer.
Perfect.
The way I like to put it, corporations aren't people. Corporations are liability shields, which is literally why you form a corporation, is to protect yourself from liability. And you can also, a good way to do it is to actually just avoid the question the way that Pudner was suggesting, by talking about special interests. People don't usually realize that the special interests generally form 501c4 corporations. So it ends up being the same thing. This money doesn't usually, I mean, it does sometimes, but it doesn't usually flow directly through businesses. A lot of the big money special interests are using this same tool to hide their activities. So if you talk about special interests rather than corporations, that's often useful. But if you're talking about corporate personhood directly, then a shorthand version of Ken's longer argument is that they're not people, they're liability shields.
And that's a great point. They avoid liability and basically allow them to conduct immoral behavior. So why do we want to, if you're not responsible for your actions, the people who are behind the corporation don't have to answer for the bad deeds of the corporation. Why do we want to encourage that? We're encouraging immoral behavior. So lots of reasons why corporations should never be thought of as people.
Perfect. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Sam. Let's go to Doug now. He's nice enough to pull over on his way home from the airport. Doug, good to be able to hear you.
It's good to be on the ground.
So we got a couple questions for you, Doug. When did you first get this idea to land your plane on the lawn of the U.S. Capitol building, and why did you think it was the right thing to do?
Can I give about a 3-minute answer to that first question?
You can, of course. Yeah, you got some time.
It's not a 10-second soundbite. Okay,
no, you have time.
I had become involved in money and politics fairly shortly before my adult son committed suicide by head-on collision, killing the driver of the other car. And it wiped me out emotionally, to the point where I was pretty sure I was going to commit suicide. It occurred to me that what my son had done deliberately, completely misguided, showed incredible dedication. He deliberately drove in the dark on the wrong side of the highway at a high rate of speed. And I went, what if that level of determination was channeled in a nonviolent way to bring attention to the issue of money and politics? Would it be possible to get for a moment the attention of the nation and focus it on that single issue? So I've had a few people, ask me, how could anybody get to that frame of mind? Well, it's not something I recommend. Okay. I went through the darkest part of my life after discovering the issue of money in politics, and what I did seemed like it might be preferable to suicide. Okay. In a worst case scenario, it would take me to the same place. In a best case scenario, one person might make a difference. And so that's how I came to be in the frame of mind. Now, once I was in the frame of mind, the issue became, how do you do something spectacular and how do you focus it on the issue? And I was working for the post office at the time. A friend of mine who was also in money and politics, a friend named Mike Shanahan, we had been discussing the idea of letters to Congress. And he said, what if we sent our ideas about money and politics in certified letters to every member of Congress? And I said, well, that would cost about, I think it was about $2,500 is what certified letters would cost. And they already know. We wouldn't be telling them. I said, what we need to do is deliver that message, that letter, to every voter in the United States. And of course, Mike, being practical, says you can do that by certified mail. All right. It would cost millions. But that's where the idea of letters to Congress came from. This wasn't my idea. Mike's idea was, why don't we deliver our ideas in a letter to Congress? And that, combined with the flying, became the way that this spectacular act could hopefully be focused on why I was making the flight and why it was worth risking my life. That worked partially. It's unfortunate that I didn't have better communicators lined up after I made the flight in order to tie it tightly into money and politics, because the media doesn't want to talk about money and politics. And so they would glibly run the 3 words by the audience, campaign finance reform. And that was why I flew. There was almost never any in-depth discussion of why I made the flight. What worked is that the media did want to talk to me after I made the flight, and I had the opportunity to bring it up every time I was in front of the camera. And I tried to do so with what skill and dignity I could. But every time I talk to somebody like you, Mike, I'm aware that there are better communicators than me out there. There just wasn't anybody else who knew how to fly a gyrocopter.
Wow. Thanks, Doug. That is an incredibly powerful story. Thank you for sharing that with us. We've got a few more for you, Doug, so hang tight.
Okay.
Were you frightened at all during the actual flight? Tell us about that a little bit, about the experience from taking off and what that was like.
I didn't take off from Florida. I actually trailered the gyrocopter from Florida first up to Virginia, and then because the wind was blowing from north to south, I drove from Virginia all the way up to Pennsylvania. And I left from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And all the time that I was really from the time I left Florida and when I was in Virginia for a couple of days, and then when I was in Pennsylvania, I was scared shitless that the police would intervene. I'd already been interviewed by the U.S. Secret Service, and they knew my complete plan. They just didn't know when it was happening. So I was really afraid that I would be stopped and arrested on the ground. Once I took off, I wasn't afraid. Okay. I had flying concerns. Okay. But I was aware I could be shot down. I wasn't afraid of being shot down. The most important thing was that I make the statement. And as I told other people later, even if I had been turned into a cloud of aluminum chaff and red confetti by a missile, I would have done it because the letter would have survived, even if I had been shot down. But if I'd been taken out on the ground, nobody would have ever known or cared, and I still would have gone to prison. So I was scared right up until the time of takeoff. After that, no, I was not scared. I was concerned again when I landed, because I realized that all of my efforts at publicity while I was in the air had not worked, because everything in DC was normal. As I overflew the Capitol Mall, everything was normal. There was nothing to indicate a police alert. And I went, they don't know I'm coming. When I land, the Capitol Police who were there at the Capitol building are not going to know that I'm nonviolent. So at that time I was concerned, and I decided it would be a very good idea to look friendly.
Okay, thanks. These are great answers. Appreciate it, Doug. Let's see here. Why the gyrocopter? Why did you choose that vehicle?
Because it was see-through, like a bicycle. A person looking at a regular aircraft could easily be convinced there's a bomb hidden somewhere. But you look at the silhouette of a gyrocopter, it's see-through like a motorcycle. You could see the engine, you could see the gas tank, you could see me sitting in a chair, and you could see the skeletal frame. But there was no place to hide a bomb. And it was also, there was no body, no framework, there was no defense. And there wasn't any kind of a defense I could put up. So the best defense was to appear defenseless.
Okay, thanks. I think for that reasons that you just outlined are the same ones that Jayson said earlier he would never step into one of those things. All right, Doug, this might be the last one here. Do you have any future plans for your activism?
Yes, I do. I've got a plane that I'm in a gyrocopter. We call them planes as well. I've got a gyrocopter that I'm putting a new engine and new landing gear on. It's a different design than the first gyro that I had. And the plan is to take that gyrocopter to every state capital in the lower 48 in a 4-month tour to promote the groups like Wolfpack who were working different aspects of getting money out of politics. Right now, when I do it is up in the air. It depends a whole lot on COVID. I've got to do it so that I have the opportunity for each stop to be the opportunity to do interviews and maybe a speech, interviews at the airport. And I'm going to do a national tour where the focus is initially local. Because, and let me step back to something I said before. And now, about in politics, they don't like to talk about corruption. The first politicians who've been willing to put us on the forefront is Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren. Okay. Up until they started talking about it, virtually no politicians were. And the media doesn't like to go there. But the local media does not know that there is a rule against it. So I can talk about money in politics at the local level and it will get coverage. And I'm hoping, expecting, planning that by the time I finish this 4-month tour, it's going to have gathered national attention. And I'll have the opportunity to do the message again the way I wished I had originally to a national audience about how we need to get big money out of politics. Okay. Reversing Citizens United is the first biggest step of that. And so I want to do that. I don't want to form my own group. The groups and the leadership already exist. The problem is you have problems getting traction with the media. Tell me if I'm wrong. They don't want to cover it. What?
You're not wrong.
Yeah. So what I did before with partial success was get national attention. I'm going to refine that and dedicate myself to a 4-month trip where I come in through the back door, because the networks will tell the local media that they can't cover it. They think the damage is going to be too small. The thing is, by the time I've covered much of the country and it gets picked up and it becomes a national event, they won't be able to suppress it. They'll have to cover it. That's what I want to have happen. And the focus is on the groups that are working on the different aspects of getting big money out of politics. And if I can get people to become aware that you exist, that other groups exist, and I say, find the group that you're comfortable with and get involved to the degree that you're comfortable. Find a group you're happy with and get as involved with them as you're happy with it. If I can increase the level of interest across the board, then I've done something positive, something important. I can't do what you're doing. I certainly can't be Lawrence Lessig. But if I can amplify what you're doing, then I've made a contribution.
All right, Doug, thank you so much, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. Sorry the other thing didn't work out as we planned. And
we had fun, Doug. Don't worry about it. We were talking while you were flying, so it's all good.
I knew that you were, and I tried to give you some video that you could go ahead and put up on the screen while you were doing that.
Were you able to see Jayson giving you landing signals? He was doing this. He kept doing.
No, in sunlight. Sorry, Jayson. I decided that.
Yeah, it's okay, Doug.
The best thing to do video. All right. Sorry about that, Jayson.
All good, Doug. Thanks again. Thanks for thanks for doing this today.
You got my heart going.
Okay, he's got one question for you, Jayson.
Oh, sure. What's going on?
Can I line up a flying thing for you?
No.
With the pilot? Okay. I'll pay for it.
All right. If you're in Vermont, yes, and we'll stream it.
Yeah, I'll take his spot. Can I go?
You're awesome,
right.
man.
There it is.
I let it go. Thanks,
right.
Jayson.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome.
All right, let's do a few more questions. Let's see. So we've got a bunch of our top leaders here at Wolfpack on the call. So I'm going to ask you first. Do you see questions in there that you want to grab? We've got a ton of questions, so probably won't be able to get through all of them. And if not, I'll just start it off.
There's one from the Rhode Island one I can answer super quick.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
It's from Sarah. What were some of your pivotal interactions to victory, convincing legislators, getting them to give you a vote, etc.? I think we went over at least some of the most pivotal ones in our story. I think, Mike, you'll definitely remember the phone banking we did for the chairman of the Senate committee was huge. Like, we would have never even passed the Senate that day if we didn't do that. I mentioned the fundraiser we went to for our sponsor, where I got to meet and kind of hang out with the chairman of our House committee, which wound up becoming a co-sponsor, and that became pretty pivotal. Those are probably the two biggest ones that I can think of. And that's only because, not to be modest, but we really just focus on getting the votes. But those pivotal interactions definitely wound up catapulting us. And
are you doing this in a rain?
Yeah, it just started raining.
I want to take care of computer there, Josh.
It's video background.
It was snowing here earlier today, just a few minutes ago.
What's that?
I answered the question. Now I can go inside.
It was snowing here in Wyoming just a half an hour ago.
I'm kidding. Wow.
So yeah, Neil's asking about our.
1 second, John. One second. I want to just add a little bit to that, because I think there's an important aspect to the Rhode Island story that I think people could learn from. Because I had my own experience there, right, separate from Josh and separate from the team members, and there were a couple of pivotal moments that were created that I do believe led to that vote and to us passing. And it was actually a different fundraiser than the one Josh mentioned. I went also to the one that he referenced where a lot of his connections came from, but I went to a different one. It was for our chairman. And I can tell you that I did not want to go to it. It was after a long day at the State House, and ended up doing it anyway. In fact, Allison was there in Rhode Island for a short time too. She went to that one, and we ended up hanging out with the chairman of our committee all night. Actually, it was for him, and that ended up being a really big connection for us. And it wasn't because we were talking about our legislation or we sold him on the issue of our legislation and our plan. It was because we were just there. This is what we mean a lot of times when we talk about personal relationships. If you go to some events that these legislators are at, you're basically going like in their territory, right? This is where they feel comfortable. This is where they spend their time. And if you're there and you become one of those people, then they become not just more comfortable with you as a person, then just by by getting to know you, they become more comfortable with the idea of our legislation. It just it's trust, right? So much of this is trust. Like, why, if you're just coming up to somebody and saying, hey, I want you to support this legislation, there's going to be a certain amount of people that will do it just based on logic. But we've really found that, going to these events are just really important. And so that was one thing that really stands out to me. That ended up being, an important thing in Rhode Island. Another one, we canvass a lot. And that's another tactic that we use at Wolfpack. And we were canvassing one day. It was about 2 weeks before the end of the session. And I knocked on the door, the random door. And it was the woman who answered the door was, I said, hey, we're working on this legislation. She's like, oh, no kidding. I know Teresa, she's like, I'm like her second mother. And Teresa was the Senate president, right, at the time in Rhode Island. So in a situation where we were not sure if we were going to be able to pass, if they were going to prioritize it. And it was me and one other volunteer, and we sat there for probably 45 minutes. Once I realized like, oh, wow, she actually knows, someone that's very important here. We just took our time and we got to know her, and she loved us by the end. She loved our plan. She picked up the phone, called the Senate president right there while we were still at the House, and and said, look, these Wolfpack people are great. You got to do this. And so it's like these little moments that you don't think are that big of a deal probably at the time. When we went to that fundraiser, me and Allison were there for the last 3 weeks of session or something like that, canvassing with the team and just getting it going and helping Josh and Justin. Man, we did not want to do that. I can't stress that enough, but it's like, this is what we talk about when we mean perseverance, right? Like it's those days where, like, if we hadn't gone to that, there's a chance that connection might not have been made. So you got to take every single opportunity. I mean, that's my advice to everybody out there working on state level legislation. Any single time, anytime you can do that, do it. And I probably have, I have more stories like that are just simple little things that happen along the way from each of these states where we pass. But the takeaway for me is these personal relationships, it's real. When we say that, like, it matters. Like, get to know them on a personal level, So I want to add that.
I bet Allison wasn't on here. We could have her share her license plate story when she went out for drinks with leadership. But
oh yeah, God, there's so many. Hard to keep track. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, let's go on to the next one. And then we've got
Leah wanted to take one, and I think Ken wanted to add some one to what Leah wanted to answer. The first one.
Do you want me?
Yeah, go for it.
So the question from Neil Goldstein: haven't we seen that persuasion based on facts isn't enough? Can we talk a little about ethical emotion and advocacy? And I have a personal example of how true this actually is. Working in the Tennessee legislature, we were meeting with a representative talking about our resolution, our goal, and all of that. And the discussion took an interesting turn. This representative felt that the Constitution should be equated with the Bible in that it is a sacred document that shouldn't be touched. It should have been left alone from what the founding fathers originally wrote, and that's how it should stay. And that took me aback a little bit. I wasn't quite sure how to approach that conversation. So we just kept talking. And through the further conversation, we were able to discuss her values, what she thought was so important, and how that needed to be protected. But then discussing how within either circumstance, whether the Bible or the Constitution, is it not also our duty to do what is right, to try to protect our fellow man? And through talking more from a value perspective, looking at what the representative or the legislator holds as their top highest value, you have to appeal to that and talk about things in that kind of framework. That lends a different context and connection to the facts. The facts support the values, and you have to approach it in that different way. It's a little bit different connotation, but the facts alone won't connect sometimes, and you have to find a way to make the facts support the different style of discussion.
Okay, and I'd like to take a swing at that question too. I don't know how many of you were in the previous session. I'm a professor of law at the University of Wyoming. One of the courses I teach is Persuasion. I actually written a co-author of a textbook on persuasion. And one of the points I like to make with my students early in the semester is facts push, stories pull. And it's easier to pull somebody in than trying to push something on them. So facts are very pushy. And when you're pushed, your instinct is to resist. You don't want to be pushed. But if there's somebody's inviting you in, pulling you in, that's going to get inside their head more quickly. And stories do that. So in fact, the textbook I'm the co-author of is Your Client Story. So we teach how to use stories to persuade. And that works perfectly. It's worked very well for us with Wyoming Promise here in Wyoming. We actually got the Wyoming House of Representatives to pass a resolution calling for the 28th Amendment. It's a Republican House of Representatives. We got 37 of 60 votes to do that by using stories. The big story was there had been some dark money monkey business going on in the primary for the governor's race the previous year. And they saw these dark money groups from out of state that were trying to influence who's going to be the Republican candidate for governor in Wyoming, even though they're from out of state. We didn't know where they're from. And they hated it. The Republicans hated that. So that story was able to persuade people, yes, maybe we need to do something about dark money in politics. So stories resonate inside of you. They appeal to your sense of morality and values. And stories are the way to go.
If I may add another perspective too, making it relate to something that the legislator has personally experienced, like talking about their campaigns. And one representative had so much out of state money coming in for his opponent that he was, once we made the connection of this is what that is, he was immediately on board with what we were talking about. So finding ways to connect it better makes a difference.
I'll also plug a segment that we did yesterday. It was run by Jody and Ronnie about using your personal story. A great way of using a story that connects with the listener, with other people, is to make it personal to yourself. Because the more personal it is, actually, the more interesting it is to the people who listen to it. Because there are commonalities in human experience among all of us that resonate with each other, because we've all experienced a lot of the same things or a lot of similar things that are really important, and that stories have a unique way of touching within each of us.
Yeah, that's why when we help people craft testimony, we always start with the personal story. My testimony tends to get very fact heavy and fact intensive, but every single time I always start by talking about my kids before I say anything about Article 5.
Okay, well said. What else? Anything jumping out here that anyone wants to take?
So Neil had a question that we didn't get to during this weekend asking us to clarify Wolfpack's position on Citizens United.
Yeah, I can take that quickly. Citizens United is not necessarily the most, I mean, we just did the long answer to that question, of course. The short answer is Citizens United is a case that many scholars think was decided correctly on the facts, but the legal precedent that it's set and the way it's been used and the way it was reasoned has created a tremendous problem in our nation. And that's really well illustrated by other cases by American Tradition Partnership v. Montana and others that throughout a century of very effective state-level protections against the corrupting influence of money in politics. And so, while the facts of that case maybe should have led to that organization winning, the holding of that case has been a tremendous disaster. And you could argue whether or not the facts are rightly decided. People do dispute that in both directions, but we don't care about that.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Any other ones jumping out at people that you want to grab? No, there's quite a few. Here's one. This is a long question, but we might as well tackle it because I'm sure it's on more than just one person's mind because the whole convention thing, Runaway Convention. Brenda Johnson has one here. She's saying that, and Sam, maybe you can start this off, but I'm sure any of us can take a stab at it. She says it's a clarification from an earlier question.
Yes, I answered this one in the chat, but I'd be happy to do it again.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but no, I want to answer it for a broader audience.
Okay.
And what I said, and I hope she tuned in yesterday, because the first thing I said when I answered it in chat was that I was hoping she would tune in to my talk yesterday, where I explicitly refuted some of the things. The question that she was asking was specifically about the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. They explained why any convention call, no matter how narrowly written, is likely to result in a runaway convention. A convention is empowered to write its own rules, deciding how delegates are chosen, how many delegates attend, and whether a supermajority requires approval, is required to approve amendments. Nothing in the Constitution prevents a convention, once convened, from setting its own agenda, influence powerful special interests like the Koch brothers. A convention could even choose an entirely new ratification process. The 1787 convention ignored the ratification process under what was an established and created one. So yeah, it's referring to one specific article by the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. And what I pointed out when she said that question, this was before my talk, this was on Friday, and I refuted, I think, everything that was in there in my talk, but that's a very long discussion. What I want to encourage people to think about when they're doing their own research, think about an area where you're an expert. And then look at a newspaper op-ed or a political statement about that area where you're an expert. How surprised are you to find that they're wrong? Because it's pretty common. Anything where you happen to know the facts behind it, and then you see the news and you're like, I worked on a case years ago where the newspaper was reporting that somebody had stolen $25 million. And our forensic accountant was saying, I don't know how much this person has stolen. I don't know how the newspaper claims that they do. I'm the person who has the most information of anybody. It's important to, when you're evaluating legal stuff like this, that you look at the actual published peer-reviewed articles, not political statements. The Center for Budget and Policy Priorities is opposed to the Balanced Budget Amendment because they are actually experts with their own particular opinion on budgetary issues. They're not experts in Article 5. And if you look at the sources that they actually cite, and then you look for those sources, many of them flat out don't say what they claim that they said. The best example from my talk yesterday is Antonin Scalia. They say specifically that he changed his mind from 1979 by that one sentence that they quote from him, without showing the tremendously carefully considered reasoning that he had in 1979 and the full context of his 2014 reasoning that shows that that's not what he was talking about at all. He was saying a completely different thing and saying that the ratification process is a protection. I could go through every point in here one by one, but I refer you to my talk yesterday where I did that.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Yeah, and look, just to add to that, we're gonna have to cut it off, right on time here because Rena's panel is coming up. That you definitely don't want to miss. But the bottom line on that one is it's just a conversation. You can't change the Constitution at a convention. If it's a runaway convention, is the same thing as a runaway conversation. So if the states called a convention for a limited subject and the whole country was watching and everyone knew what they were there to do and they decided to talk about something different, then it's basically that's what Congress is right now. They can have conversation about anything. You're always going to have that protection of the ratification afterwards. It's not comparable to the 1700s convention because that was called under the Articles, which was not called under Article 5 of this U.S. Constitution that's existed for hundreds of years. Two totally different, not comparable things. But that's all the time we have for that one right now because we just want to end on one more. And we are only going to have time probably for one person to answer it, maybe two. But Leah, you wanted to take Josh's. So you can start, and then we'll see how much time we have.
Sounds good. I feel like this question is really important, and everyone that's in this panel that has been with Wolfpack for a while, or at least has been an activist in any way for a while, can speak to this. The question is for all of the panelists, what motivates each of you to keep fighting the good fight? What keeps you optimistic? This is an awesome question, Josh Hall. Well done. It can be hard. This is a tough path to tread. We have if you're a volunteer, you have jobs, you have family, you have other responsibilities, and you're trying to do this at the same time. And then also outside of your personal life, just inundated with the news and everything that's going on in the country, it can be overwhelming. It can be hard to keep that optimism about this. For me personally, I feel better about everything else because I'm doing this. I'm doing something about it. It's hard to do, but you have this amazing team around you. You have everyone that supports you, all of the resources at your disposal. And we're constantly evolving, growing, and improving even as we go. And even if you're feeling overwhelmed, you can talk to the people around you. You can delegate some of your responsibilities and take kind of a breather. But mostly it's just know that this is how we fix everything that's broken, and we have to. And so the hope is we get there. The plan is that we get there, and then it becomes so much easier and so much better for everyone we know and love. That is the drive. And you just have to have the tenacity, even on bad days. Just know that this is going to solve so many horrible issues. And that's the point. I don't know if anyone else has a recommendation for things that keep them going.
That's what keeps me going right there.
Yeah. I would just say that if we know something is broken, there's one thing we know for sure. If nobody tries to fix it, it stays broken. Right? So the only thing you can do is try and fix it.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in that, like Sam, like the main motivation for me is not to pass this broken government on to my kid. That was the main motivation. But what pushes me every day is really the volunteers, like volunteers that I see here, but also volunteers in New Hampshire. That's what really energizes me in this movement and keeps me going forward is them. Their energy actually feeds me and makes me fight harder. So that's really, and if you're looking for motivation, I mean, turn on the news. Like you turn on the news, you see any issue that comes up, money in politics, broken system and corruption. I mean, it's all there. Every root problem we're dealing with right now is just that we don't have representation. That's all there is to it.
So what I was going to say, Eric, that was perfect. The only thing I'll add is just love of country. I know that sounds corny, but I love America. I grew up understanding and being taught the American dream, and I don't want to see that die on my watch. So, and then the volunteers definitely fuel that tank for me. So, you took my words out of my mouth, Eric.
I could just throw in too. I think it's about perspective, right? Because for all the reasons, yes, that's the motivation, but also just kind of like changing your perspective to realize, like that old saying, it's a marathon, not a sprint, or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's a saying like that. But big changes take time. You know what I mean? So I don't expect it to be tomorrow, or you know what I mean, or whatever. I look at it, you just keep working, you keep moving the ball forward. Every year you get your team into a situation where it's a little bit closer, and you kind of break it down to, the teams, to the states, you know what I mean, and expand it out. Well, that's what it takes.
Okay, well, I think we should end it there because I want to make sure we give enough time to the next panel because it's packed. We've got Rena Goldman, our communications director, and 5 panelists. And yeah, that's going to be a good one. So definitely stick around for that. And we will be right back in a couple minutes. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. Appreciate it.